Welcome to Unfiltered Nightmare, where the stories are real and the terror doesn't end when you turn off the lights. You know that feeling when something's off, but you can't quite put your finger on it? That prickle on the back of your neck? That's your survival instinct trying to tell you something. Most of us ignore it. The people in tonight's stories wish they had listened sooner. Before we dive in, if you're enjoying these nightmare-inducing tales, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content that'll keep you up at night. Tonight, I'm sharing 5 disturbing true stories that prove sometimes the scariest monsters aren't hiding under your bed, they're hiding in plain sight. These aren't urban legends or creepypastas. These are documented incidents that happen to real people, people just like you and me. So lock your doors, check your windows, and whatever you do, don't pause this in the middle. Let's begin.
The kitchen was outdated, the floors creaked, and there was this weird smell they couldn't quite place, but it was theirs. A 3-bedroom fixer-upper in a quiet town 2 hours outside the city. The price was right, and they had big plans. The smell started about 2 weeks after they moved in. Sarah noticed it first, a musty, almost sweet odor that seemed to come from the kitchen. Mike figured it was a dead mouse in the walls. Old houses, you know. They put out traps, sprayed air freshener, even called an exterminator who poked around and found nothing. But the smell persisted, getting stronger on some days and fading on others, like whatever was causing it was moving around. Then there was the draft. Even with all the windows closed and new weather stripping on the doors, there was this cold breeze in the kitchen that made the back of Sarah's neck prickle every time she cooked dinner. Mike would stand there trying to figure out where it was coming from, running his hand along the walls, checking the baseboards. Nothing made sense. They lived like this for 3 months. 3 whole months of that smell, that draft, and this growing feeling Sarah couldn't shake, like they weren't alone. She'd be chopping vegetables and suddenly spin around, certain someone was behind her. The house would creak at night, and she'd lie awake, listening, trying to convince herself it was just the old bones of the place settling. Mike thought she was being paranoid, until the night he dropped Sarah's grandmother's ring. They were cleaning up after dinner when it slipped off the counter and bounced behind the kitchen island. Mike got down on his hands and knees with a flashlight, but he couldn't see it. The island was built into the wall with this decorative wood panel on the backside. To get the ring, he'd have to remove the panel. He grabbed his drill and started unscrewing. Sarah stood behind him, arms crossed, complaining about how he should have been more careful. The screws came out easily, too easily actually, like someone had removed them before. When Mike pulled the panel away, he went completely silent. "Mike?" Sarah said. "Did you find it?" He didn't answer. He just stared into the dark space he'd uncovered, his face going pale in the kitchen light.
"Call 911, Mike whispered. His voice was shaking. "Right now, Sarah, call 911. Sarah fumbled for her phone, her hands trembling as she dialed. "What is it? What did you find?" Mike stumbled backward from the opening, nearly knocking her over. That's when she saw it. Behind the decorative panel was a hollow space, maybe 3 feet wide and 4 feet tall, just big enough for a person to crouch in. And inside that space was a sleeping bag, their sleeping bag, the one that had gone missing from the garage 2 months ago. Next to it was a neat stack of their mail, letters they'd thrown away, bills with their names on them, a birthday card Sarah's mom had sent, all carefully arranged like someone's personal collection. But the worst part? The thing that made Sarah's stomach drop? There was a small hand mirror wedged into the gap between two floorboards, angled perfectly so that whoever sat in that cramped dark hole could look down through the cracks and watch them eat dinner at their kitchen table just 5 feet away, watch them laugh and talk and live their lives, completely unaware. The sleeping bag was still warm. Sarah could feel the heat radiating from it when the police officer reached in to pull it out. Warm. Someone had been in there, maybe minutes before Mike unscrewed that panel. Someone had been living in their walls, breathing their air, eating food from their garbage, watching them through the floorboards while they slept. The police found the entry point in the crawl space under the house, a loose grate that led directly to the hollow space behind the kitchen island. Fresh mud was smeared on the ground outside, leading into the woods. Whoever it was had heard Mike working on the panel and slipped out just in time. They never found him. The police searched for weeks, interviewed neighbors, checked security footage from every store in town. Nothing. The creepiest part? When they processed the sleeping bag, they found dozens of strands of hair, both Sarah's and Mike's, woven into the fabric like someone had been collecting them, braiding them together while they watched. Sarah and Mike moved out the next day. They never went back, not even to get their stuff. Some houses aren't worth saving. Some houses have already been claimed by someone else.
Jessica's night shift at the hospital ended at 1:30 a.m. She'd made the drive home 100 times, 40 minutes down Route 47, a dark, winding back road that cut through farmland and forest. It wasn't scenic, but it was empty, and after a 12-hour shift dealing with screaming patients and broken equipment, empty was exactly what she needed. She was about 20 minutes from home when she felt it, that soft, rhythmic thumping that every driver dreads, a flat tire. Jessica cursed under her breath and pulled onto the shoulder, gravel crunching under her remaining good tires. She sat there for a moment, staring at her phone. No signal, of course. She popped the trunk and got out, flashlight in hand. The front passenger tire was completely shredded, rubber hanging in strips like torn skin. She'd have to change it herself. She'd done it before. She could do it again. That's when the headlights appeared in her rearview mirror. A white SUV, pristine and gleaming even in the darkness, pulled up behind her. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a clean button-down shirt and khakis, way too put together for 2 a.m. on a deserted back road. His smile was wide and white as he approached. "Looks like you could use some help," he said. His voice was smooth, almost musical, too friendly. Jessica's instincts screamed at her to say no, to get back in her car and drive on the rim if she had to. But she was tired, and he seemed harmless enough. Clean cut, polite, the kind of guy you'd see at church on Sunday. "I can manage," she said, trying to sound confident. "I insist." His smile never wavered. "It's not safe for you to be out here alone. Please, let me help. You just sit in your car where it's safe and warm. I'll have this fixed in no time." Something about the way he said safe made her skin crawl. But she was exhausted, and honestly, she didn't want to fight. So she nodded, thanked him, and climbed back into her driver's seat, locking the doors behind her. Through the rearview mirror, she watched him walk to her flat tire. He knelt down beside it, and that's when things got weird.
He wasn't changing the tire. He wasn't even touching the jack she'd left on the ground beside him. Instead, he pressed his forehead against her car bore, right against the cold metal, and closed his eyes. His lips were moving, whispering something she couldn't hear. His hands were flat against the door panel,
like he was feeling for a heartbeat. Jessica's breath caught in her throat. What the hell was he doing? She thought about honking, telling him to stop, but something kept her frozen. Some primal fear that told her if she made a sound, if she drew his attention, something terrible would happen. So she sat there, watching in the mirror as this stranger pressed his face to her car and whispered secrets to the metal. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 2 minutes, he stood up, he brushed off his knees, walked to her window, and tapped on the glass with one knuckle. When she rolled it down an inch, his smile was even wider than before, so wide it didn't look human anymore. His eyes were completely unblinking. "All fixed," he said cheerfully. "You drive safe now." Then he walked back to his white SUV and drove away, his taillights disappearing into the night like he'd never been there at all. Jessica sat there for a full minute, trying to process what she'd just witnessed. Finally, she got out and checked the tire. It looked the same, still shredded. He hadn't changed it. He hadn't even tried. What the hell had he been doing? She changed it herself, hands shaking, glancing over her shoulder every few seconds. When she finally got home and pulled into her garage, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Wrapped around her rear axle, hidden where she couldn't see it in the dark, was a thick industrial chain, the kind used to tow vehicles. It was wound tight around the metal, secured with a heavy padlock. If she'd driven faster than 30 miles per hour, the chain would have locked her wheels, the car would have flipped, she would have rolled into the ditch and died in the dark on that empty road. The police found no trace of the white SUV, no security footage, no witnesses, just the chain, which had been reported stolen from a construction site 3 weeks earlier. Jessica never drove Route 47 again.
Lockdown drills at Westfield High were routine. Every few months, the alarm would sound. Teachers would lock doors, and students would huddle silently in corners for 40 minutes while administrators walked the halls checking procedures. It was boring, annoying. Most kids used it as an excuse to catch up on sleep or scroll through their phones on silent mode. But on November 14th, Room 214's drill became something no one would ever forget. Marcus Chen was a junior, sitting near the door when the alarm blared through the speakers at 1:15 p.m. Miss Patterson, their history teacher, did what she always did, turned off the lights, told everyone to get against the far wall, and reached for the door handle to lock it. Except this time, when she turned the handle, it didn't click. She tried again. Nothing. The lock mechanism was broken. "Stay quiet," she whispered, her voice tight with panic. "I'm going to find someone." "Don't open the door," Marcus hissed. He didn't know why he said it. Something just felt wrong. Miss Patterson hesitated, hand on the knob. That's when Marcus saw him. Through the small rectangular window in the door, the kind of reinforced glass with wire mesh inside, stood a man. He was wearing a janitor's uniform, dark blue coveralls with a name patch that read Martinez. But Marcus had never seen him before, and Marcus knew every janitor at Westfield. His dad worked in facilities management. The man wasn't moving. He was just standing there, staring at the door, staring at them, and in his right hand, held up so they could all see it, was a key, a silver master key dangling from a red lanyard. Miss Patterson slowly backed away from the door, her face pale. The entire class was frozen, watching the man through the little window. No one breathed, no one moved. Then the man did something that made Marcus's skin crawl. He lowered his head and pressed his ear against the wood. He closed his eyes, and his mouth curved into a small smile. He was listening to their breathing, their heartbeats, the tiny shuffles of 30 terrified teenagers trying to stay perfectly still. His free hand came up and began stroking the door handle, slowly, tenderly, like he was petting something he loved.
The man stood there for the entire 40-minute drill. 40 minutes of stroking that handle. 40 minutes of listening with his ear pressed to the wood. 40 minutes of that small, satisfied smile on his face while 32 people sat in the dark, too terrified to even whisper. Marcus watched him the whole time. He couldn't look away. The man's eyes never opened. He just stood there, swaying slightly, nodding to some rhythm only he could hear. Every few minutes, he'd lift the master key and jangle it softly against the door, like he was teasing them, like he was saying, "I could come in any time I want. I'm choosing not to." When the all-clear announcement finally crackled through the speakers at 1:55 p.m., the man's eyes snapped open. He looked directly at Marcus through the window, gave him one slow, deliberate nod, and walked away, just like that, down the hallway, taking his time, hands in his pockets, like he'd just finished his shift. Miss Patterson unlocked the door with shaking hands and immediately radioed the office. Within minutes, the school was swarming with police. They pulled security footage, interviewed every staff member, checked visitor logs. The results made everyone's blood run cold. There was no janitor named Martinez. There was no janitor in dark blue coveralls on campus that day at all. The uniform he wore? It matched the style used by Jefferson High, a school 10 miles away. But Jefferson hadn't employed anyone named Martinez in over 15 years. The master key was the worst part. When they examined it, they found serial numbers that matched a key reported stolen from Westfield 3 years earlier, stolen by a former maintenance worker who'd been fired for inappropriate conduct around students. They'd changed all the locks after the theft, or so they thought. Apparently, the locks in the original East Wing, where room 214 was located, had been missed during the rekeying. It was a clerical error, one that meant the key in that man's hand could have opened Marcus's classroom door at any moment. He'd had access the whole time. They never found him. The man in the janitor's uniform vanished like smoke. But Marcus still has nightmares about that smile, about the sound of that key jangling against the door, about how thin the barrier between safety and horror really is.
Emma Rodriguez was the kind of new mother who researched everything. She'd spent months comparing baby monitors before finally settling on the Peak Pro 3000, a top-of-the-line AI-powered camera that could track movement, detect faces, monitor breathing patterns, and send instant alerts to her phone. It was expensive, but her daughter Lily's safety was worth any price. The monitor had been perfect for the first 3 weeks. Emma loved being able to check on Lily from anywhere in the house, seeing her peaceful face on the screen, watching her tiny chest rise and fall. The AI features were impressive. It could distinguish between normal movement and potential problems, and it even learned Lily's sleep patterns. Then, on a Tuesday night at 3:14 a.m., Emma's phone buzzed with a notification that made her heart stop. Multiple faces detected. She jolted awake, grabbed her phone, and opened the app. The nursery appeared on screen in night vision green. Lily was there, sleeping peacefully in her crib, her little fists curled beside her face. But the AI had drawn a green tracking box around something else, a second box in the empty corner of the room by the window. Emma stared at the screen. There was nothing there, just the curtains, the wall, the window. She watched for a full minute, and the box didn't move. Then it disappeared. System glitch, she told herself. The AI probably detected a shadow or the way the curtains moved in the draft. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next morning, she checked the activity log. That's when her hand started trembling. The multiple faces detected alert hadn't been a one-time thing. According to the log, the AI had been detecting a second face in Lily's room every single night for the past month, always at exactly 3:14 a.m., always in the same corner, always for approximately 7 minutes before the face would disappear. Emma told herself it was impossible. The nursery was on the second floor. There was no balcony, no ladder access, nothing. But that night, she stayed awake, watching the monitor feed on her phone. She watched the clock tick closer to 3:14 a.m., her heart pounding. At 3:13, nothing. At 3:14, the green tracking box appeared in the corner, and Emma finally saw what the AI had been detecting. It wasn't someone in the room. It was a reflection in the window. A face pressed against the glass from outside, peering into the nursery. A man's face, pale and ghostly in the night vision, staring down at Lily's crib with an expression Emma would never forget. Not anger, not violence, but something worse. Fascination. Like he was studying something precious, something he wanted. Emma screamed and ran to the nursery. When she burst through the door and flipped on the light, the room was empty except for Lily, who'd woken up crying. Emma ran to the window and threw back the curtains. Nothing, just darkness and the empty backyard below. But when she pressed her face to the glass and looked down, she saw it. Lying in the grass directly beneath Lily's window was an aluminum extension ladder. It was still extended, like someone had dropped it in a hurry when they heard Emma coming. She called 911, and the police found footprints in the flower bed below the window, size 11 boots. The same boots had been walking around the perimeter of the house for weeks based on the weathering of the prints. The officer who processed the scene pulled Emma aside and showed her something that made her physically sick. There were handprints on the outside of the window glass, dozens of them, old ones and fresh ones, layered over each other, like someone had been pressing their palms and face against the glass repeatedly. The glass was warm to the touch, despite the cold November air. Warm from someone's breath, someone's skin, someone's body heat as they leaned close and watched. The AI camera, with its sophisticated facial recognition technology, had been trying to warn her the whole time. Multiple faces, one inside, one outside, both in the same frame. They never caught him. The boot prints led to the street and disappeared. No fingerprints on the ladder. He'd worn gloves. No DNA evidence. Just those handprints on the glass that took Emma 3 days to scrub away, though she still sees them sometimes when she closes her eyes. Emma doesn't live in that house anymore. Neither does Lily. Some violations can't be undone, and some windows can never feel safe again.
David Park didn't usually stay in boutique hotels, but his company had booked him into the Harrington Hotel for a 3-day conference in Baltimore. The place had charm, exposed brick, vintage fixtures, the kind of carefully curated aesthetic that showed up on Instagram. His room was on the 4th floor, which should have been perfect, except the elevator was broken. "Sorry about that," the desk clerk had said with a practiced smile. "Maintenance is on it. Stairs are just past the ice machine." David had groaned but grabbed his suitcase and headed for the stairwell. 4 floors, no big deal. He'd pushed open the heavy door and started climbing, his wheeled suitcase thumping against each step. 3rd floor, 4th floor, almost there. But when he shouldered through the door at the landing, he realized immediately something was wrong. This wasn't the fourth floor. The carpet was missing, exposing scarred plywood underneath. The walls were bare drywall, unpainted and covered in pencil marks and measurements. And the doors? Every single door in the hallway was missing its handle, just empty holes where the locks should have been. Closed for renovation, he thought. He'd gotten off the wrong floor. It happened. He turned to go back to the stairs, but that's when he heard it. The sound of typing, the distinctive clack, clack, clack of an old typewriter coming from one of the rooms halfway down the hall. David hesitated. Who would be working on a floor that was clearly under construction? Maybe it was a contractor, someone doing inventory. Still, something about the sound made his skin prickle. It was rhythmic, constant, never stopping for even a second. Against his better judgment, David walked toward the sound. The door to room 307 was propped open with a paint can. Inside, illuminated by a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, sat a man on an overturned milk crate. He was hunched over an ancient typewriter, balanced on a wooden plank, his fingers flying across the keys. But there was no paper in the machine, no paper on the plank. The man was typing into nothing, the keys striking empty air, the carriage return lever swinging back and forth with no page to return to. David stood in the doorway, frozen. The man typed for another 10 seconds before stopping abruptly. Then, without looking up, he spoke. "You're late for the shift," he said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "The manager is in the basement."
David didn't wait to hear more. He turned and ran back to the stairs, his heart hammering in his chest, taking the steps 2 at a time until he reached the actual 4th floor, his room, safety. He locked the door behind him, threw the deadbolt, and shoved a chair under the handle for good measure. For an hour, he sat on the edge of the bed, trying to calm down, trying to rationalize what he'd seen. Maybe the guy was homeless, squatting in the closed-off floor. Maybe he was mentally ill, acting out some delusion. It didn't matter. David was leaving in the morning. One night. He could handle one night. At 11:47 p.m., just as he was finally drifting off, he heard it. Clack, clack, clack. The sound of typing. Close. Too close. David sat up, his blood turning to ice. The sound was coming from inside his room, from his closet. He stared at the closet door. It was closed, but the sound was unmistakable. The same rhythmic typing, the same mechanical clatter of keys striking nothing. Someone was in his closet, typing on a machine that shouldn't exist. David grabbed his phone and his wallet and bolted from the room. He didn't care about his clothes, his laptop, his suitcase. He just ran, down the stairs, through the lobby, to the front desk. The lobby was empty except for a figure standing behind the desk. David's words died in his throat. It was the man from the 3rd floor. Same face, same empty expression, but now he was wearing a manager's suit, dark blue blazer, pressed white shirt, name tag that read manager. He looked at David without a trace of recognition, without any emotion at all. "Checking out?" the man asked. David couldn't speak, he just nodded frantically. The man typed something on the computer, then reached under the desk and produced a receipt. He slid it across the counter. David grabbed it with shaking hands and ran for the door, out into the cold Baltimore night, not stopping until he was 3 blocks away. When he finally looked at the receipt under a streetlight, his stomach dropped. It was completely blank, just white paper. No hotel name, no charges, no dates, nothing. David never went back for his things. The Harrington Hotel sent them to his office 2 weeks later, but he threw the box away unopened.
Some places aren't meant to make sense. Some places exist in the cracks between reality, and the only smart thing to do is run and never look back.
And there you have it. 5 true stories that prove the real world is far more terrifying than any horror movie. These things happened to real people. Maybe they're happening right now, somewhere close to you. So tonight, when you're lying in bed and you hear that strange noise in your walls, or when you see a reflection that doesn't quite match up, or when someone offers to help you on an empty road, remember these stories. Remember that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like janitors. Sometimes they look like helpful strangers. And sometimes they're so close you could reach out and touch them through the floorboards. This has been Unfiltered Nightmare. If these stories kept you up tonight, do me a favor, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another terrifying tale. Sweet dreams, if you can manage them. Stay safe out there, or try to, anyway.